The time of judgment is upon us. Justice League is now out. The reviews are in. And so this is one of the movies that we were looking forward to, but in a much more skeptical light, because this movie has been plagued from the very beginning with reshoots, with Warner Bros. Trying to figure out what to do with the damn story and the tone, trying to come off from the remnants that was Batman vs. Superman and how to really proceed with the remainder of the franchise, and at the same time trying to compete with Marvel. So instead they're like, you know what? That thing that Marvel does, let's do the opposite. Let's just do the complete opposite of what Marvel does and see if by some fucking shit luck we hit it. Let's just wave the gun around blindfolded and see what we hit, right? Then tragedy struck with the departure of Zack Snyder to tend to his family after the sudden death of his daughter, so that sucked. But that brought in Joss Whedon to, as he put it, bring connective tissue to the entire project. And now it's finally out. That was literally months ago. And now here's the movie before our very eyes. Went and saw it. And oh my god. Gotta be honest, guys. I'm gonna have to completely disagree with the reviews on this one. Holy shit, this was fun. Yeah, ever so often, once in a blue moon, I see the reviews. I often bounce off of them in a way after seeing the movie, not initially, because I always want to give everything a chance and I always want everything to be good. But I went into this thinking, okay, saw the reviews, saw the percentage on Rotten Tomatoes, even though Rotten Tomatoes does not dictate my life, but it's always like an anchor. It's like a compass. Oh, those reviews are always like a compass to me, where I know I don't need to follow them, but more often than not, there's like a science. However, with this movie, I went in with the mentality saying, I know I might not be expecting Wonder Woman, but please, for the love of God, just be better than Suicide Squad. This was way better than Suicide Squad, and it was better than Batman vs. Superman from my personal standing. There's no other way to put it. From beginning to end, this movie was a whole loads of fun. But at the same time, it never felt like I was literally watching two movies from two different directors. They blended well. So much so that I would not mind seeing a movie where they were both working on the project on set, both of them together. Because I can tell that Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon are men of comic books. Like, they love comic books, but they're very yin and yang-ish in a way. But just like yin and yang, there's a little bit of each other found in the other. And I would love to see a movie where they're both, from beginning of pre-production to the ending and post, I want to see them do a legit movie together. Because never did I feel like I was watching two separate directors at work. It felt like one kind of finished off the other, and they communicated well in some way, whether it be through Skype, over the phone, or something like that. There was a melding that actually worked for the most part. I say for the most part because on a much more subtextual way, and I know I'm talking an awful big talk here about a movie, fucking Justice League, but they managed to strike a really good balance with the characters, because ultimately that's the humongous anchor with this movie that brought in the fun, was that from beginning to end, the main cast here that makes up the Justice League, from Batman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, of the Flash, Aquaman, everybody, they were fun. They were fun, and at the same time, everybody was likable. Even some characters that initially kind of worried me at first, like Cyborg. I thought Cyborg was going to be really stale, but he had his moments where I'm like, man, this guy's doing a little bit better job than I was really expecting with him to do with this role. Despite the majority of his body being covered in CG, I saw some set photos where the dude, everybody else is decked out in their awesome costume, and yet poor Ray Fisher has to wear the mocap suit, and he's just right there looking dorky as fuck. And of course, after the effects are added, he looks a little bit better in some way, in some shots more than others. But he still was able to bring something to role, and that's probably what everybody else did with the roles. The only ones that were just a little iffy was maybe Ezra Miller and Jason Momoa as both Aquaman and the Flash, and even then, they were still great. It's just that there were moments where they were a little bit different than what you were expecting the character to be, but overall, you still like them. And I think that's probably the biggest saving grace with this movie, is that you can say whatever you want about the plot or anything else, but every single character that makes up your league is likable, and they all work really well with each other. And that's ultimately what you needed to get right with the Justice League movie, and I feel like they got it right. And that's what brought fun to not only watching these characters be in the same room and having conversations that feel right for characters. There's even one in particular where Batman is having a conversation with Diana, aka Wonder Woman, and the way that they're talking to each other, it was like I'm watching the Justice League cartoon. But I mean that in the most sincere compliment possible, because it felt like they weren't really betraying the characters. It felt legit, and I was like, this is what I'm talking about. Why couldn't we get material like this 2 movies ago? Especially with another element in this movie that I don't want to spoil, even though the majority of you already know what I'm talking about because there's no getting around to it. But what they got right with that one element, where was that 2 movies ago? Because that would have been awesome and would have made me like that element way more. And because I really like these guys, that's why I like the action sequences. Sure, humongously bloated with CG all over the place. It's like, you know, a CG tube just squished all over the screen. But because I like the characters, I was having fun with the action scenes. And yes, I'm looking at a splash of CG all over the screen, especially in glorious IMAX. But because you like the characters, that's how much of an effect they can have on the overall movie. And that led to me having fun. Sure, at moments, I do feel like the comedy element was maybe pushed just a notch. And I only say that because in the instance of Batman, there's certain lines that he's given where, yeah, the line itself was funny, but the line would have suited better for another character, not so much Batman. And coming out of Batman, it felt a little off character. But besides that, I felt like they really... I'm not going to say they got it perfect, like they caught lightning in the bottle with the team, but I think this is the best that they could do at the moment, considering how much Warner Brothers is scrambling around to get these things together and to try to updo Marvel. And it's funny that I mentioned that because despite trying to outdo Marvel by doing the opposite of what they're doing within their game plan, they still managed to replicate the biggest problem that Marvel has: their villains. Steppenwolf in this movie completely don't give a shit because, for one, he's a complete CGI character. You only have a voice attached to the character, played by Kieran Hines, I think is his name, the actor, and that's it. There's no personality. There's nothing really within this villain except to be an obstacle to bring the Justice League together to confront and to fight. And I know that that's kind of like a basis for an awful lot of the cartoons and the comics, but we're in a different age now when it comes to the movies, and we expect better from Marvel, and now at this point we kind of expect a little bit better from DC. So they got to step it up a notch in terms of villains. Sure, they allude to kind of things of potential villains and stuff like that to come in the Justice League future, especially with a flashback sequence that was jam-packed with an awful lot of details here that made me go, ooh, looking forward to that. But what we deal with in this movie when it comes to the mother boxes and that whole grand scheme of things, it felt very routine because it's just another bad guy trying to conquer the world and there's nothing compelling about that. But what strangely bugged me the most, it's not so much that villain trouble or the slightly weak plot, because I will admit it's a bit on the weak side, but again, the characters save it. However, there's no redemption for the really bad green screen effects. And I guess I could also kind of envelope this entire thing with saying that the movie does show a little bit of the seams when it came to the 2 directors. Because earlier in the review I mentioned that I barely noticed the 2 directors working against each other or separate from each other. I meant that in the subtextual sense, where I meant how they handled the characters and the story. They never felt like they were like juggled between 2 directors. Because when you're dealing with 2 directors, you can often get direction from one director saying act this way, and then get a completely different direction from another person, and they tell you to act another way, and sometimes that can show off on screen. I felt like they handled that very, very well. On a technical level, however, you guys have all this money. You couldn't have possibly chroma keyed out some of the green screen that's bouncing off of some of our heroes' costumes, because it's really obvious in certain scenes. You can actually go on YouTube right now and look up a clip that's a conversation between Bruce Wayne and Aquaman, and the green screen is completely obvious. And I don't know if they were really under the clock when it came to this, but man, another month, maybe as a Christmas release, they could have polished some of that stuff up, because it's bad. It's very distracting and not only that, but also some cuts where I'm like, I can clearly tell there was more footage here and you edited it out primarily because you heard so many people say that Batman vs Superman was super bloated, so you needed to cut out like a whole 30 minutes, but the seams are showing from time to time. But I think in that respect, when my biggest problem and most distracting problem from the movie is a technical one that involves green screen effects and editing, then I gotta be honest, I think you really did a good job at putting a smile on my face when it came to a superhero movie. And I can't believe I'm saying this coming out of Justice League, a movie that was getting like a 48% and critics are tearing it apart, and yet here I am walking out of it going, that was fun. Not perfect, flawed, with significant things on a technical level, but overall, you got the team right. And I think that's the most important thing that you need to nail in a Justice League movie. And they got it. So I'm going to be giving Justice League a very, very high 7 out of 10. Only reason, and this is a very debatable thing that I would love to have like a podcast with or to talk to somebody else about it on camera, but the only thing that keeps me from going like a 8 or like a high 8 or something like that is that this movie would have had a much more profound impact with its likable characters and all of them coming together and having that very cool portrait shot of all of the members of the Justice League together if this movie didn't follow the opposite route of Marvel. If they did set up the heroes with each individual movie. Sure, at this point you really think that Cyborg deserves their own film, or Aquaman, or The Flash. Primarily you're focused on Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, the Holy Trinity, like you see in my sweater. But it would have helped out service the characters better. I mean, you can kind of make the argument for Flash or Cyborg because they did a good job at introducing them at the beginning of the film. But this movie would have had a greater impact if we did have that proper build-up, so that we can probably lose our shit when we would have seen them all together finally at once, just like we did with the Avengers. I'm sorry if it's like another comparison that you're probably getting tired of at this point, but it's one that I think needs to be emphasized because we love these characters, and we love to see them getting over their differences and fighting a common cause because that's just what the Justice League is all about. But bottom line, it was fun, the characters were great, and there's enough little nuggets of information, especially from some of the end credit scenes, that there's plenty to really talk about. And to be honest, there's enough that warrants a spoiler video coming very, very soon. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, please let me know, spoiler-free, no spoilers, in the comments what you guys thought of Justice League now finally have watched it. If you haven't watched it, will you be going to see it? Or have you been deterred at all by some of the news of the reviews, the held back Rotten Tomatoes score, or even some of the things that came up during the process of, you know, getting the post-production done, and Joss Whedon coming in, and Danny Elfman replacing the composer, who, by the way, Danny Elfman had the time of his life composing this movie, and you can hear it. You can hear him just geeking out, and you're probably going to do so once you hear certain things in the score, so keep your ears peeled. So that about does it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to support the video by hitting the like and share buttons, and of course, subscribe to the channel for future content. Until next time, guys, see you later. Go back to the difficulty. Go back to the difficulty. I want to show you something. You notice how much of a drop-off there is between the colors right there if you keep going to the right.
It goes doop, 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 doop.
Yeah.
I wasn't even paying attention to that.
Really? You just noticed right now?
I'm sorry. I don't pay attention to things like that.